Right. Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to the first ever SANS Cyber Day. And SANS, thank you for having me and letting me participate and record this talk so I could participate. And we're going to be talking here today about exposed data, right? And a little bit about who I am, right? I've got almost 22 years of experience as a federal law enforcement. I was an agent for a Department of Homeland Security. Founded a bunch of multiple OSINT units. I'm a principal SANS instructor, author of the SANS OSINT courses, the SEC 497 Practical OSINT, and co-author with Mr. Deckens, Dutch OSINT guy, as most people know him, on the Advanced OSINT course 587. And you see a lot of stuff like that. But what a lot of people don't know is I also have a ton of experience dealing with the private sector, not only from a consulting front. I had outside work authorized when I was with the government. I was very fortunate, but also was like a cheat code. My wife has done a lot in the private sector. She ran cyber threat intelligence for a Fortune 100. She's an executive at another one now. And so it gives me a very, very kind of well-rounded perspective of how blue teams, right, how cyber threat intelligence, how they utilize OSINT and what they actually need from it. And so when I had the opportunity to present here at this event, I was really kind of torn because a big part of me wanted to speak about enumeration, right? About finding infrastructure that people just don't know they have. I've done a lot of merger and acquisitions due diligence. I've never seen an accurate one yet. And you're actually like, just letting people know, like, well, hey, what are you using two of these for? It's like we don't have that. Like, yes, you do. You have two of them actually. Look, they're right here. Like, there's no ambiguity here. And I love doing that stuff, and I love sharing those techniques with other people. It's why we do it in our courses. But I decided to talk about exposed data and breach data instead, which seems like an interesting choice for a course focused on cyber defenders. But when we start thinking about how our modern organizations are getting popped, right, and we start talking about phishing emails and deep fakes and vulnerabilities and everything else, let's stop and take a second. And don't take my word for it. Don't take anyone's word for it. Let's look at the actual raw numbers according to CISA. And we see here, right, spear phishing and external services and trusted relationships and drive-by compromises, right, like watering hole attacks. All of those things combined don't even add up to 50%. How are people getting into our modern organizations? Literally, over 54% of the time, they're just starting off with valid creds and coming right in, right? And if you're thinking like, well, what about, MFA, right? I had a reporter with the Financial Times a couple of months ago reach out to me and ask me, how are hackers bypassing MFA? Because I do a lot of work in this space. And I'm like, I'll tell you what it is. Like, you're not going to like my answer because it's not sexy. It's enumeration. I'm going to find 100 different ways into your network. And how many do I need to find that don't enforce MFA? One, right? That comes back to kind of the enumeration too. But as we see here, like I said, if literally a majority of the time our organizations are getting popped, it's because attackers are starting off with valid creds. Like, I think it's worth it for us to take a few minutes today and kind of discuss what that ecosystem looks like because it's eye opening, I think, for quite a few people, right? And we'll start off with I wish these breaches didn't happen, right? I'm not happy that they're out there. Like, most people are not, but they are. And we can do our best to try to stop it and defend it moving forward, but you can't really clean up what's done and already out there. And if our adversaries are using it, I think we should strongly consider using it too. And so these are a few things that we're going to kind of talk about today. And we'll start off here very, very quickly with legality. I gave my first ever talk on breach data, I believe it was 2019 at a SANS OSINT summit. And we didn't really have a lot of legal kind of guidance there. And I always say, I'm not a lawyer. I've spoken to several lawyers about these topics, and I'll happily share what they've told me, but we didn't have like a lot of actual official guidance on paper out there. We actually do now, right? We do. We're going to talk about that in just a second. And if you're the type that think like, well, I would never do this, and I've heard some people that I respect quite a bit say they would never use breach data, right? They don't see any difference between using breach data in their research or investigations as they do like purchasing stolen property. It's fine. I wouldn't try to talk them out of that position. It's just personally not my position, right? And so all of these things that I've done, right? I've had companies that I've supported that have had law firms they worked with that got compromised and the data posted on the dark web like client data and then saying, oh, don't worry, none of your data's on there. No offense, I'm going to trust and verify. I've done that same type of work when I was still with the government as well, too. I retired about a year and a half ago, right? We've seen Qualys, right? Some of their data, word got out that customer data from scans was posted on the dark web, right? It ended up being not that big of a deal. But still, I had multiple people, public and private sector, reach out to me that day and wanting to see, is our data out there, right? Even like VIPs, private sector organizations. When my wife was running cyber threat intelligence for a Fortune 100. I remember her getting a call when the MGM compromise happened. And it was some of the VPs at her organization were concerned that they had sensitive information in there. And they wanted to see, like, hey, do you have a copy of this? We'd like to see what our exposed information is. So there's a lot of ways that we can use this information from good. And I think that's an important distinction to make. And legally, like I said, we actually have a little bit of guidance now, right? If you look at this, the DOJ released this in early 2020. And basically, and we're going to talk about kind of the seedy underbelly today, this criminal ecosystem that I get to do deep dives on when I teach the OSINT classes for SANS that I absolutely love. And you see here that according to this guidance from DOJ, just hanging out and passively gathering information from an online forum, even one that is full of criminal conduct, is unlikely to constitute a federal crime, right? Particularly done with any criminal intent. And I love that, right? I love the fact that intent is actually considered here because I do a lot of things that if I told you what they were, and I mean, I will tell you what they are, they sounds crazy. Like, wow, you do that? Like, yeah, wow, you use this, you use that. Like, yeah, like I'm not doing anything bad with the information, or I'm doing good for the information. I'm open and honest about what I'm doing for this information. So I like the fact that intent is considered here. So there's not much ambiguity here, just hanging out where these criminals do business and grabbing a copy of stuff. They really have no beef with. Where it starts to get a little more opaque, right? Where they kind of try to provide a little bit of context, but it's much kind of softer, is when it comes to purchasing stolen data, right? Because none of us want to be considered like supporting the criminal underground, right? None of us want to support the criminal underground at all. So this is where it can get a little bit weird, right? And we can go into the nuance of this when we kind of teach and cover it. If someone hacked, right, an organization and then offered to sell me the information for $500, even if I really wanted it, I wouldn't take it. Like, that's not right. Right. Now, if that information gets posted and traded around a bunch and now it's posted on a website and I can grab a copy of it for a couple of dollars, like literally like $2, $3, well, that's something I might feel a little bit better about, right? But that's a tough type of nuance to get in here. But this is where I said, like I said, there's a little, not quite as firm as just hanging out and grabbing data for free. And the good news is there are plenty of places where we can hang out and grab the data for free, right? Ethically, this is a tough one sometimes, right? When you see someplace that actually gets their entire network kind of zipped up and posted on the dark web, right? And you start looking at like email servers, personnel files, right? I remember one specific organization that I had to grab a copy of when I was with the government for reasons, and it had all like the personnel files in there. There was a folder called terminated employees. Right, imagine, like, I think most of us where we work know at least one story of like someone that was fired under absolutely amazing circumstances. And can you imagine if that was you? And maybe it is, hey, no judgment. And that information was now out there in a file on the dark web for anyone to download. Like, that would be absolutely crazy, right? And unfortunately, it's what we see sometimes. So let's take a few minutes now and talk about what I think is one of the most important things in here, and that's the actual types of breach data, right? Because it just kind of gets lumped together and people don't realize. And the number one thing is just the raw breach data, right? Whatever the attacker got, we get. If it was just a scrape of some basic information like we've seen from Facebook, that's what we get. If it was they dumped the entire database, that's what we get. Right, and you see here, I think this is the Drizzly, the alcohol delivery app that is going out of business right now. I saw they're closing down shop, so poor little out on the curb for them. But their database got popped, and it's out there. And this is one of the One of the more useful databases for OSINT too, because it has phone numbers in there, right? That's one thing that people get these prepaid phone numbers that aren't tied to them in any way, shape, or form, but then they use it to sign up for a service gets popped, and that's why we cover breach data extensively in OSINT classes, right? So this is just the raw breach data. We have combo lists, which is basically people take raw breach data and make a deduplicated list of just email addresses and passwords, right? For pen testing or offensive operations, this is what I want. Because some of these, imagine how small a text file is. And this is just a text file of emails and passwords. And I have combo lists that are literally over 100 gigs big. It's insane, right? That many email addresses and passwords. And this is where credential stuffing that we see in our organizations come from, right? A lot of these combo lists. We have just lists in general, and this is a lot of times information that's maybe designed for marketers, right? Legitimate purposes, but then it kind of ends up on the criminal underground, right? It ends up in the hands of spammers. And now they're using that same type of information, right? And they'll have basic information, names, address, phone numbers, but then like how many people are in the household? What's the income? Do you have kids, right? All this crazy thing, right? Everyone's always afraid of what the government has. And I can tell you from a lot of time with the government, it's nothing compared to what the advertising industry has, right? So some of these data sets can be kind of just incredible to look through. This though, this is the scariest one. And this is people that a lot of people, something a lot of people have heard about, know about, but haven't ever really seen. And when you see it and you talk about the raw volume that's out there, it's kind of jaw dropping, right? And this is these data stealer logs. And over a decade ago, when I first started getting involved in information security, the you'd hear about bots and you'd hear about botnets, right? An attacker takes over a computer, that's a bot. They have 10,000 computers, well, now it's a botnet. But a lot of times what they were being used for was almost juvenile in nature, right? It was denial of service, sometimes for extortion, trying to get money, sometimes just because someone angered you on an online video game, right? But people have gotten a lot smarter nowadays, and they realize that, wait a second, I took over 10,000 systems. That's probably at least 10,000 people. A lot of those people probably have jobs, right? Some of these people have jobs at probably an organization with a lot of money. Maybe I can use their access, right? Especially now after the pandemic when you get so many people that kind of authenticate to work from home, right? And then using personal, machines for work machines for personal stuff, that getting mixed together. This is a very, very big deal. And so now what we see is you see these groups out there like, Redline and a few of the others that specialize in this malware that tries to gather information on these systems. And it puts it out there for people to download and use for all their nefarious purposes. And from a criminal perspective, it's almost like gold mining. Like, there's gold in here. You just kind of got to dig and search and kind of find it. And this is where a lot of the evil that we see now comes from, right? And to take a look at this real quick, this is a blog post that I wrote in February of 23. And we can see this, every one of these folders is a compromised system. And there was like thousands of these. And this is only one group's data stealer logs for one day, right? All of these compromised systems. And if you look in here, we see things like their passwords, right? The ones that are saved in the browsers, the ones that are saved in the system, all this type of authentication information, screenshots, right, of the system. Once again, more passwords. You see their Gmail, Facebook, right? Some other locations right there. Another looks like a casino right there. Premier Bet, right? Browser autofill. All the information that our browsers put in there that makes the internet easier to use. But now they're grabbing that, different files that we see on a system. This is absolutely terrifying. But I think what people really don't realize is the volume that's out there, right? Because a lot of these are shared on Telegram. And if we look, don't judge me for some of the things you'll see in here, but I'm in a lot of different Telegram channels. I think like over 100 at least in here. And they're pretty much all just super shady. And this is one channel And this is just today. As I'm recording this, it's March 19th. So one channel, one day. The files and data stealer logs tend to be very small, right? Because it's text files of passwords, things like that. We're not talking about massive complete dumps of the operating system. It's only key useful information. And so an individual system's information is very small in size. And still, for this one channel in one day, what are we looking at? There's over a gig from this morning. Then here's 431 megs. Here's 122 megs, 416 megs, 947 megs, 25, tiny one, 183, 714 meg, almost 900 meg, 600 meg. There's over a gig and a half. Seriously, and I'm just scrolling down and there's more and more. And this is one channel. And this is one day. And how hard is it to actually download these? Where's the small one? I just click there and it starts to download, right? And you're just kind of giving it right there. Now, I gave a talk recently at SANS webinar. It's out there on persistent monitoring. If you Google search, like the OSINT watchdogs was in the title. And I cover, right, doing this on Telegram, doing this on Discord. So I've got code written that monitors and handles this kind of for me, automatically downloads, processes the data, shoots me in a report every morning of anything that I actually need to action on for the organizations that I monitor for. And I've got not breach data, right? I've got like a 24 terabyte drive full of breach data, right? That's my breach data drive. I have other drives with it as well too. But just for data stealer logs, I have an 18 terabyte hard drive hooked up to a little Nook that actually does the monitoring, processing, everything for me every day. 18 terabytes. And as I grab new data from a day, an old day gets deleted, right? Because it's just kind of a moving type of thing that I'm monitoring for. At any one time, that 18 terabyte drive will have about a week's worth of logs. Crunch the numbers once again. 18 terabytes, a week's worth of logs when an individual system is very small. Are there going to be duplicates in there, the same logs from multiple sources? Absolutely. Doesn't matter. Don't care. Don't care if I see one alert or three for something that's important, right? You're still going through there. And so just the volume and what this looks like on the backside, I just don't think people have a lot of familiarity with. And this is one of these things that I love discussing, right? Because people think, oh my God, this is horrible, but what can I do about it, right? There are companies out there that kind of monitor this and they'll charge you, but you can do this for free. I know I do it with just homegrown Python, my homegrown Python, my good friends, ChatGPT, Claude 3 Opus, things like that. And my little bit of Python code, just kind of, making this happen, and storage space is cheap. So you can do this, right? We can absolutely trade effort for a lack of budget. And I've had to do that my entire government career. And that's why our classes focus on how to do these things for free, understanding how things work and free ways to do them. Not just assuming that you have a board procurement department and a seven-figure budget to go out there. So let's go back to the slides here a little bit. I don't think I'm on track, but I don't really care. All right, so we have the data stealer logs there, and these data stealer logs feed these marketplaces that are crazy, right? You may have heard about the Genesis takedown last year where people were buying initial access. It got taken down. Well, part of it did, part of it was still online, but that was just one, right? And the hottest one right now for initial access on the dark web is one called Russian Market. And as we see here, right, this is for RDP access, so remote desktop in. And we see the different IP addresses, not the exact ones, they're partially hidden, where they're located, what type of system it is, all of this information. And if you look at the cost here, what are we talking? $7, $8, $11, $12 is the most expensive one on there. You can search by city, you can search by internet service provider, you can search by specs in the system, we can search by all of that. Think of how scary this gets when you start looking for infected systems in places like Langley, Virginia, right? Fort Meade, Maryland, right? This goes to like a very kind of dark place very, very quickly, right? And that's just the RDP. If you see here the logs, like the way we were just looking at, here's logs from these systems and the same type of thing. And look at, once again, these search options. I can search by zip code, right? By city, by all of these, and still you're talking about a price point of like $10 a pop, right? And this is, you see there, the authentication, This went to Facebook, to accounts.google, to these different sites. And so, yeah, I'm trying to get access in this organization. Well, I can just come here to Russia Market. You have to create an account here. You have to make like at least $100 deposit in cryptocurrency, but it gives you that as funds to buy things. So this is where I do most of my Christmas shopping nowadays. But seriously, if I want access to an organization, I can just come to places like this and search for it. And instead of like having to do everything else, just buy it, right? And this things like this, persistent monitoring, these places are absolutely worth keeping an eye on. And we'll see some examples here at kind of the end of this talk. So, how do we find this data, right? And first things first, do I do this all myself? Do I house it? Well, yeah, I just said I did, right? If someone asks me if they should, I'll say probably not, because it's not the easiest thing in the world. I will then tell them exactly how I do it and, how to do it and everything else, right? It's fine. It's just, there are some downsides here, right? These data sets can be large, they can be annoying to search. A lot of these forms use the Russian language and are full of hackers, right? We'll talk about a few places that are traditionally more safer in here as well. And obviously, always check with legal counsel if you have any concerns, right? Laws, policies vary greatly amongst organizations and amongst countries. Leakcheck.io is a very cheap way to get access to this. And by cheap, it is $25 for a lifetime license. I've had my lifetime license for, shoot, I think like 3 years now. Never had a problem with it. The downside is it's very limited in searching. I can search for specific email addresses, specific usernames, but really that's about it, right? I'm not searching by phone numbers outside of like Russia and a few countries that they'll allow that for. I can't search for an entire domain, etc. They have enterprise plans for that aren't much money. Like I want to say it was yeah, they're not much money. Like you're talking hundreds, not thousands, but still 25 bucks for a lifetime is amazingly cheap. And what it kind of looks like here, I put in a username and it shows me 3 different emails that all use that username. Clearly it's all the same person because they all have the same password, and you can see the actual sources of where that data is from too, just to get an idea of what it is. So leakcheck.io, like I said, you can check that out, no pun intended, if you're interested in that stuff. Dehashed is a very, very popular one that a lot of people recommend. You see it's very kind of popular on OSINT, Twitter, etc. It has a lot of information. They let you search it in the ways that you want to search it, by password, by phone number, etc. But there's a problem. And I really want to not be right about this, but I'm afraid I am. I have seen no evidence that they've added data in like 2 years. I'm not seeing anything new, and I know because I have new stuff. I check it there, it's not there. I filed support tickets, I never got a reply. I went to Twitter several months ago and just kind of said, hey, is anyone here seeing that they're adding anything new, any type of evidence of that? Nothing. Like, so yeah, it's still there and it still works. I still have a membership, but I haven't seen them add anything new, and that is troubling, and I hope they start up again. Like, I don't want to be right about this. Like, I want it to be a thing because it is a very affordable way to get a little more access to the data than LeakCheck provides. And by affordable, Dhash, they have weekly, monthly, yearly. The yearly is around like $180 a year. So a heck of a lot better than a lot of things that are targeted towards enterprises instead of individuals. This is we had a site called Raid Forums where a lot of people would go and kind of trade this data. It was easy to use, things were in English, things were very affordable, right? You could get credits, earn credits by posting, commenting on stuff, or purchasing credits, and then you would use 8 credits to download files every time you wanted to download a data set. And if you just bought credits, if you didn't earn them through posting and interacting, if you just purchased credits, 8 credits was around $3, right? So a very easy, very affordable way to access this data. Raid forums went down. Then we got breach forums. Then breach forums went down. But now breach forums came back. It was breachforums.com got taken down. Then it was IS. Now it switched to CX, right? So it kind of keeps on coming back in some iteration. Let's take a look at this here real quick. And I'm not logged in, but this is, as we're looking at it, there's a lot of different kind of forums on here on different topics, including data stealer logs. This is just the leaked databases. So let's see what's on here today. Phone carrier, 34 million from the US, Celebrity Smile, some Russian site, chess.com, looks like a scrape. And we can click in there and kind of see a sample of this data too here. The AT&T 70 million database, that's been in the news a lot this week. It looks like there's two different versions of it. This one's been collated. Let's click on here real quick. Come on, pull up for us. And they'll usually post like a sample of the data, right? Information about it. And I know at this point right now, AT&T is denying this is them. So I think there's more to come here. I don't have an opinion or any insight on information on this in one way or the other right now, but we see some information there, and I'll try to get off of this a little bit so I'm not blowing up anyone's spot. We'll go back to the slide, but that's kind of what it looks like. And to sit there and to download something is, like I said, if you were just purchasing credits, is about $2 or $3 worth of credits to what it kind of boils down to. So not saying you should, not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying this is the place where a lot of times defenders who do want to access this data will hang out and acquire it, because it is frankly a heck of a lot easier. It's a much lower bar than trying to infiltrate some of these like top tier Russian forums like Exploit, XSS, etc. that can be much more difficult. So we can just Google it. Once you know the name of like one leak data set, you can Google that and find places that host it and other things as well too. And we can search torrents for it. The trick with torrents is a lot of times it's named things that are very, very generic, right? Very, very generic. And so what you need is you need a BitTorrent search engine that actually searches the file names inside the torrent, not just the name of the torrent itself, like Pirate Bay and most of the big ones do. And what we can do here is we have one called BT Dig. And even though the logo has two G's, if you try to go, that's probably not going to work right now, but the one with one G does, right? So BT Dig, but with only one G. It's not my site. Don't yell at me, right? But now, next time you see an article about breach data and you see that they have the information like redacted, but you can still see like a file name, like ledger orders, buyers only, we come here to BT Dig and we find a 600 gig file called raw. That's not going to do you a whole heck of a lot of good searching Pirate Bay, right? But now as we come down here, we see they have this ledger breach data kind of buried under there. So it's a very, very useful. I can sit here and talk for several minutes about the usefulness of this, but we're almost out of time, right? So honestly, right now, though, most of the cool kids are on Telegram. You just saw me go on Telegram and everything that was there. You saw all the channels that I were in. If you were curious, like, I'll always share like what channels I'm in, etc. But a really good place to find these is Deep Dark CTI on GitHub. If you've never been here before, you're welcome. But they have a list of sites on the dark webs where the criminals kind of underground community hangs out, like, these exploit forums and all these different places, Telegram channels, etc., that we can kind of sit there and monitor, right? And once again, you can pay an organization a lot of money to do this. And if you have a budget for that, that's great. But if you don't, you can do some amazing, amazing things for free, right? And it's like I said, I never assume, and that's what we focus on in here, just how things work, what this ecosystem looks like, and how we can monitor it for free. That if you have a budget to pay for it, great. If you don't, you still have options, right? You still have options. That's important. So we'll finish strong here, how this information can be used for good. And these are all real world ways that I have used this information. And they've all been fairly recently, within the past year or so. Right. So yeah, kind of the normal ways. This was a large company seeing a sharp increase in their users' accounts getting compromised because their users didn't have emails for their service, right? They were just like, no one uses, and it wasn't Netflix, but no one, unless you work for Netflix, has a Netflix email, right? We auth with our Gmail or some other email service. They were seeing a sharp increase in those accounts getting taken over and wanted to determine the source. So they started giving me some. I started looking through and I was able to figure out the sources of where it was coming from, right? And making a recommendation that then, anyone else using this source, you should probably have them roll their passwords as well and create new ones. This was recent, right? This is a Fortune 100 company, and they had an MGM copycat attack, right? The MGM attack that happened in the summer of 2023 got like very, very ugly, and then a little bit later, and it was socially engineering of the help desk. And the company dealt with this. They got compromised, but then they kind of wanted to know how the attacker was able to get some of the information that they had. They put the emails from the people who they had information on, and they put them into how it had been pwned, and they all were in the 2021 LinkedIn breach, but they didn't know what other information was in there. So they came to me, do you have a copy of this data set? And can, you let us know what information is in there so we know, once again, if this is the source. A lot of what I do is if places get popped, they know they've been popped, but now they want to know how, right? How do the attackers get these cloud credentials? How do the attackers do this? And that's where I come in and try to find these sources. And that's kind of fun, if I'm being honest. As an early warning system, I apologize for how redacted this slide is, but once I tell you what it is, I think you'll understand why, right? This is from Data Stealer logs. You can see there was late in the summer of 2023 by the dates up top. And this was an individual with a contractor email for a Fortune 500 company and also a guest wireless recent logon to another Fortune 500 company at one of their internal ones. And the first one, I actually didn't hit off the email. What I hit on with the guest wireless, because this was an org that I monitor for. And so I was able to let them know, hey, kill their credentials. Like, this is a thing. It absolutely needs to be dealt with, right? And so as an early warning system, monitoring for this type of stuff is crazy. And another very, very scary example of that, this is another company that I monitor for. And on one of the data stealer logs, I got an alert one morning that made me do a double take because I was still kind of half asleep. And I'm like, wait, what? And this was an open VPN key, right, for an organization that was inside on a system that got popped and was in these data stealer logs now. So once again, it actually was valid too, which was kind of scary. And so I was able to let them know, right, kill those credentials and do that. So just keeping an eye on these systems. And once again, right, just knowing how these things work, knowing how to write this code, you can do this, right? There's no commercial products involved here. That's something that I really, once again, try to focus on in our courses. So I think that is all the time I have. I always love talking about this stuff. If you're going to see me like any conferences I'm going to be around, feel free to hit me up. I have my contact information here. Otherwise, I know we have a lot of other great content today, and hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.